In today's budget-friendly meal prep, I'm making a white bean and kale stew, saucy black beans, a loaf of sourdough, tofu ricotta spread, cucumber salad, pickled red onions and jalapenos, baked carrot cake oats, and I prepped some baked potatoes for the week. I also prepped a yellow split pea curry for the freezer to have a few meals for those days when we really just can't be asked to cook. If you're new here, my name is Immy, and I'm trying to use up everything in the cupboards, prevent food waste and save money by cooking from scratch when I can. So if that sounds good to you, feel free to subscribe so you never miss a video, and if you fancy giving the video a like, if you liked it, it really supports my channel. Okay, grab a cup of tea and let's get started. If I'm making sourdough, then I always start off the morning by feeding my starter. Depending on how the starter is feeling, sometimes it's temperamental, it could take a few hours. So I fed this with about a quarter cup of flour because I was going to be making one really big loaf today. After that, I put some white beans in the Instant Pot for my white bean stew later. Then I prepared the dough by mixing bread flour with some whole wheat flour and some warm water. I left that for about an hour while I let the sourdough starter rise. Then I added my starter and my salt. I gave this a really good thorough mix. I wet a cover to go over the bowl to keep everything nice and moist. And then whilst I got on with other things, just on the hour, every hour, I gave it a stretch and fold. I wet my bowl cover in place of cling film so that it really helps to keep the moisture in and that your dough doesn't dry out. Once I put that aside, I refeed my starter, and I basically only leave around a teaspoon left in there before feeding it again. It's really important to keep your starter nice and young and fresh, otherwise it just won't rise very well. Next, I decided to move on to the carrot cake baked oats. I made a tiramisu baked oats in my last video, and so this week I decided to try something a little bit different. Baked oats are incredibly easy to make. You put everything into an oven-proof container, and then you bake in the oven for around 40 to 45 minutes. I didn't put any bananas or anything in this one, so I added some extra plant milk to make sure that it all came together really nicely. But this recipe is so delicious and very easily adaptable. So if there are things that you don't have or you don't want to use, you can absolutely replace them or simply leave them out. And once your baked oats are done, if you let them cool down completely and then put on top whatever yogurt you like. This week I used a coconut-based yogurt, and I dusted it with a little cinnamon and some chopped pecans. Since the oven was already on, I used this as an opportunity to prepare my baked potatoes. I just gave them a scrub and a wash, and then I dried them and put them in a baking pan, adding some olive oil and some salt. I cooked these for about an hour, it's quite a long time. And I upped the temperature from the baked oats because the baked oats are about 375, but with the potatoes I up it to about 425. Next I made some saucy black beans or Mexican black beans that are by Rainbow Plant Life. That recipe will be in the description, but this is a very easy, versatile and straightforward dish. It only has a few ingredients, so it makes it really nice and easy to make, as well as being budget friendly because it utilizes a lot of things you probably already have in the cupboards in terms of spices. And for this one I decided to make a double batch so I could have some in the fridge and then also freeze some. This is a really versatile dish because I like to have it as a part of a burrito bowl, or even with just some tortillas, or honestly just on its own with some vegetables. I like to food prep in a way that you can mix and match things so that it makes it much harder to get bored of. And I also like to use the pickled jalapenos and red onions that I'm going to make later in this video. The tofu ricotta is something also by Rainbow Plant Life in her latest cookbook, and I made this in my last video. I made a double batch this week so that I could have part of it as a spread and then also have a good portion that I can make her lasagna at another time as well. It's really simple and very easy. You just shove everything in a food processor and mix everything together until it's nice. And this week, instead of plain olive oil, I used some lemon olive oil that I got from a place in Michigan that is one of my favorite places to get olive oil. I'm still making my way through the yellow split pea bag that we have because I'm using up everything in the cupboards that we do have. All the ingredients will be on the screen, and honestly, you basically saute the cumin seeds with the onion and then you dump everything else in there and put it on for about 12 minutes. And that's it. Once it's done, I just put it in a few containers and froze them so that we had them for later. If you have never made your own pickled jalapenos or pickled red onions, then this is your sign to do it because it is so unbelievably easy and cost efficient. I chopped up everything that I wanted. I made 4 separate jars, and once I put everything in my jars and just made sure everything fit properly, then I made my brine. This is really simple. I used 2 cups of apple cider vinegar, and then I used 2.5 cups of just simple water. Then I added 3 teaspoons of sugar and 3 teaspoons of salt. You can mix and match with these different flavorings just to make sure that you get the right balance for you. But this is kind of the level that I use, and it's very easy, very simple, not too acidic, but just the right amount. After a couple of months of exclusively eating things basically from the cupboard, I've been really craving some fresh food. So I decided to make a cucumber salad, or a kind of a cucumber pickle type thing. And I basically just chopped up a bunch of cucumbers and shoved them in a jar with some spring onions and some fresh coriander. And then I put over my favorite seasonings. So I put some mirin. We only had tamari, but usually I would use soy sauce. Some sugar, some sesame seeds, and some Korean red pepper powder. And that's pretty much it. I just screw the lid on and give everything a really good mix. And I'd say this probably lasts like 5 or 6 days in the fridge. Lastly, I made my white bean stew. This is a stew that is based off quite a few different recipes that I have found recently, and it's very simple. It's basically just carrots, shallots, garlic, fresh rosemary, fresh sage, vegetable stock, whole tomatoes, white beans, kale, and olive oil. You cook everything for a while, for about 15 minutes on the stovetop, and then you add your kale and then bake it in the oven for about 20 minutes. Baking in the oven is something I got from Rainbow Plant Life's recent cookbook, and she also adds quite a lot, about a 1/4 cup of olive oil after you've kind of cooked it on the stove and before you put it in the oven. This adds a really nice silky texture, and just honestly, it helps the beans to break down a little bit and make the soup a little bit thicker, and it's truly delicious. This stew is actually really straightforward and easy to make, and it is so delicious. It's nice and simple, but there's a lot of flavour in there, and it's very budget friendly because you're just mainly using beans, carrots, and some shallots. I actually think one of the more expensive things is getting herbs, so I'm gonna buy myself a rosemary plant and really take good care of it this year, because rosemary seems to go into a lot of the things that I make, and I think that that is a really great way of elevating dishes but making them more affordable and budget friendly. This also has sage in it, and sage is really easy to grow. It's very easy to look after, so that's also something that I am going to get this year. I grew a lot of herbs and things like that in my parents' garden when I lived in the UK, and they just did really well without having to worry too much about them. But because Denver is so dry, you have to be very on it with those things. But once I finish meal prepping, I want to show you the things that I have prepped for growing food this year, to just try and bring some of the supermarket costs down and using all the things that we already have in the garden and just a couple of new seeds. But if you didn't see my preparing for spring video, that's where I started a lot of the seeds, but since then I actually bought 10 strawberry starts. I thought I was buying one plant. I thought it was quite expensive to buy a start for $9, but it turns out they were 10 starts, so those are already doing really well, and I'll talk you through what I'm planning on growing this year after we finished our food prep. Once the white bean stew had fully cooled down, then I just put it in one of my other containers and put it in the fridge. In the evening, once all the food prep was done, the sourdough was finally ready to be shaped. So I just turned it out onto a floured surface, stretched it out a bit, folded it, rolled it, and shaped it. This was quite a monster loaf, so I didn't let it proof for too long on the counter, covered it, and then put it straight in the fridge. The next morning I made my sourdough loaf. Now I made a pretty big monster loaf because I just could not be bothered to split it into 2, and I'm really pleased with how it turned out. As I said, my starter had been a bit temperamental, and I actually think that it pretty much died. So I took 1 teaspoon of the starter and mixed it with a whole bunch of new flour and gave that a few days, and finally it really revived itself, and this is the first loaf that I made with it. The trick if you're making a bigger loaf is to cook it for longer with the lid on, so I gave it 10 more minutes, and luckily that was definitely quite enough. But yeah, that's my meal prep. I ate these for the next few days, and I will continue to eat these because we have quite a lot of things. I think going forward, always putting something in the freezer is going to be really helpful because it helps to extend the life of the food, especially if you're making big batches of things. So when it comes to food prep for the garden, or preparing the garden to have food in the future, I decided this year to kind of do a balance of growing things that I knew would do really well. So we have lots of different types of tomatoes, which are all doing very well right now. We have like the typical cherry tomatoes, which have always done really well for the past couple of years. And I also have some fun ones like chocolate cherry and then sun gold. I had some sun gold last year, but I just bought the starts. This year I decided to buy the seeds, and they've all come up, so that's very good because they were quite expensive. What else do we have? I also have a couple of tomatillos just here. They look slightly different from the other tomatoes. And then at the front, I just have a few San Marzanas. I tried growing these the first year that I moved to Denver, and they didn't do very well, and I think I just didn't do enough research on making sure that had everything that they needed. So this year I'm definitely going to make sure, but I'm also starting these quite early because the growing season in Denver is actually quite short, and I always have better success when planting out more mature plants. So it's only the middle of March right now, and these will not go outside until May after the last frost, so they're going to have 2 months of growing inside. I also am going to build just like a little greenhouse outside. We already have one that we put the worms in, and if I can fit everything in there then I will. Otherwise I will build just a little one so that once these get bigger we can put them outside before the end of the frost but still protect them. I also have a bunch of chilies in this one. These I started early as well because I knew that they would take a long time to pop up, which they have. I put these in at the same time as the tomatoes and they are still so much smaller. They came up like 2 weeks later. So for the chili peppers, I'm only growing ones that I love and use frequently. So we have serranos, cayenne, and jalapenos. And then I have like 10 basil plants because I use a lot of basil and I just want to make sure that they're planted at different times and we don't ever run out of basil. As I mentioned earlier, herbs are a really great thing to have in the kitchen. It's much more affordable to grow them yourself. You avoid plastic packaging when buying them from the supermarket and you use them up, and you don't have to worry about using a whole bunch of them because it's a growing plant, a living plant, instead of just a small section. I also the other day planted some nasturtiums. These are so easy to grow in the UK, but for some reason here I've had quite a lot of trouble with them. They don't seem to like being transplanted, so I got some compostable pots, which I don't usually use. I usually use a zero waste soil blocker, but I decided to do that for this to prevent any kind of root fright when I plant them out if they come up. I love these because they're edible, but also the bees in our garden absolutely love them. And then the last thing are the strawberry starts that I talked about. So they're already doing really well, even though I planted them like honestly 3 days ago, maybe 4. I'm exclusively using Ozark Beauties. I had never heard of these before, but I was actually watching a video for a video essay that I'm writing about people buying one $19 strawberry from Erewhon, a very elitist and exclusive supermarket in LA. And someone commented, it would be cheaper just to get your own Ozark Beauties specifically and grow them yourself. And I went to my local garden center and they had Ozark Beauties and I thought, let's give them a go. As I said, I thought I was buying one strawberry plant, but I've actually got 10. So I need to figure out a good situation for them and get lots of straw for mulching. So that's what we have so far. I also have a bunch of other stuff, but I'm going to plant them directly outside. Things like cucumbers for pickling, beans. I'm even trying corn, which now that I've realized they're not really space efficient, but whatever. I've got a fun tri-colored one, so we're just going to see what happens with those. And I will be planting loads and loads of wildflowers because we get all sorts of animals in our garden, from squirrels and raccoons to bunnies and lots of different kinds of birds like finches, chickadees, flickers, jays, and I think that's it. Oh, and there's another one, a nuthatch maybe? I can't remember what it's called. But I've never had problems with any of those animals actually eating the stuff that I grow, only acorn squash, which came up very out of the blue and then the squirrels stole them all. But you know, everyone's got to eat. But yeah, those are my plans for future food prep for the garden, which I'm really excited about, and I hope it inspires you to just start one pot of herbs on your own. But thank you so much for watching. I hope that you liked this video. Next week we'll be having a what I eat in a week where I show you how I put all of these different meals together. And if you'd like any more information about anything in the video or any requests for the next one, please let me know. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching and I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.